There's a saying that hypocrisy knows no bounds. That couldn't be truer with today's story. If you have not heard, this is breaking news that President Joe Biden has decided to pardon his own son, Hunter Biden. Now, this comes after Joe Biden said that he would not pardon Hunter Biden. Of course, that was before Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election. Now that Donald Trump has won, Joe Biden has decided that he is going to pardon his son, Hunter Biden. We're going to get into the hypocrisy about this story. And we're also going to show you how some of the liberals who defended and continue to defend Joe Biden and said he should pardon his son, how they stood when it came to Donald Trump and his allegations. The same liberals who said that no one should be above the law are now cheerleading that Joe Biden and his son should be above the law. We're going to get started with this clip here from NBC News. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Breaking news: Joe Biden decides to pardon his son, Hunter Biden.
Good evening. We are coming on the air with breaking news tonight. President Biden has made a decision to pardon his son Hunter ahead of the transfer of power to President-elect Donald Trump, according to a senior White House official with direct knowledge of the decision. He's expected to announce it later on tonight. And this comes months after Hunter Biden was convicted on gun charges back in June. That marked the first time a sitting president's child was convicted of a crime. Hunter Biden also pleaded guilty to federal tax charges in September. White House officials and President Biden himself have said repeatedly that he would not, in fact, pardon Hunter before leaving office. But tonight we learned of the president's decision. Again, a reversal for him and what the White House has said President Biden would do. I want to bring in our White House correspondent, Mike Memoli, who's joining us now on the phone from Washington. Tell us more, Mike. Why did this happen and why the reversal?
Well, I think we all know why it happened, but let's continue.
Mike Memoli.
Well, Hallie, this marks a reversal of what has been the public posture of the White House for months. Since the president's son was first found guilty by a Delaware jury of gun-related charges, and then later when he pled guilty to tax-related charges, the White House has insisted, including as recently as last week, that the president was not considering a pardon or a commutation of his son's sentences, which still have not, we should add, been handed down by the respective courts in which he was found guilty. But what we understand to have taken place is a series of conversations, father and son, that included just this past weekend in Nantucket. I was with the president in Nantucket this weekend. He has spent the Thanksgiving holiday there with his family for decades, but this weekend was just him, the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, his son Hunter and his family, as well as his daughter Ashley. And as the president returned to Washington to the White House last night, he began to inform the White House officials of this decision, that he would be making the pardon official. Now, the president has been discussing this matter with his close aides for some time, even as the White House publicly said that they were not considering this, but that this is a decision that obviously carries significant weight. And I must say, Hallie, I was at the White House today. I'm still at the White House now, as a matter of fact. We saw the president and the First Lady speaking publicly on the issue of World AIDS Day. And both of them were I was struck by the emotion in their voice as they were talking about the family having to deal with loss. Of course, we know the president lost his eldest son, Beau. He lost his wife, his first wife, Neely, in a car accident 52 years ago this month. And the emotion of the moment seemed to be particularly poignant for them. And so this is a decision obviously coming at the end of his time in office, with just 51 days left before he hands off power to President-elect Donald Trump. And part of the concern that has been leading to the speculation that he would do this is about what investigations might still come.
We're going to pause here and go ahead and chime in. Number one, notice what NBC News is trying to do here. They're bringing up the fact that Joe Biden lost his other son, Beau, and that is to invoke empathy in the viewers, to get you to feel sorry for Joe Biden. Now, all of us deal with loss. Joe Biden is not alone. That does not give him the moral clarity to pardon his son, Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is on video using drugs, hard drugs, not like weed, but like hard drugs. Hunter Biden also had issues with his business dealings in Ukraine with Burisma. Now, from what I understand, this pardon is going all the way back into 2014, which would also include the time that Hunter Biden was working with Burisma. This is not just about the gun charge. The gun charge, I told you before, was just a way for them to try to get something on Hunter Biden to show that they were trying to be somewhat fair. But the real charge has to deal with Joe Biden and his son, Hunter Biden, and the business dealings that they had with Burisma in Ukraine. And that is what Joe Biden is ultimately trying to cover up with this pardon. So don't be fooled by what NBC News is trying to do. Again, they are more on the liberal side. So their goal here is to try to make some type of case for Joe Biden and this decision for the public to have some type of empathy towards Joe Biden. That's why they're bringing up the loss of his son. Don't fall for that.
Would a Trump administration, would a Trump Justice Department continue with additional prosecutions? Would the prospect of his only remaining son going to jail, if that would be the sentence that would be handed down, be something that would be too much for this president, for this family to bear? And so now we have the decision that has not yet been announced publicly by the White House, but which NBC News, with our colleague Carol Lee and Sarah Fitzpatrick reporting this evening.
Mike, I know there was a bit of a sort of technical delay here, but I'm going to try again. I want to ask you this. We know that the sentencing for Hunter Biden was set to be in just a couple of weeks, December 12th and December 16th on those two separate cases. To be clear, this pardon would cover both of those convictions, right? Both the conviction and the guilty plea, yes?
That's our understanding at this point, Hallie. But I think it is important to note that one of the things that complicates this issue is that the sentences have not been handed down just yet. And so as this reporting is just coming out, we're waiting for full information. I think it's important to wait and see what the White House puts out directly on this matter, because the paperwork for this kind of issue of a pardon of this nature does require the Justice Department to weigh in. There are officials that have to go through the process of making this official, and so the under the pardon power, this is just a way for the president to spare his son of any jail time. It's also worth noting that the denials of this have not just been coming from the White House, from the president himself. I spoke with First Lady Jill Biden just after the Delaware case was resolved and the guilty sentence came down. And I said to her, I asked her this question, that your husband has the power to spare your son of this fate, this potential jail time. Don't you wish that he could exercise this power? And she said to me that we respect the rule of justice in this country, and that was not something they were contemplating. So
apparently they do not respect the rule of justice in this country. Let me make it very clear. This is a typical case of power and privilege. Those that are powerful oftentimes have more resources than the rest of us. They have a network that we typically would not have. When you are powerful, when you have money, when you have name recognition, when you have resources, you are able to do things that everyday people cannot do. What was interesting is the reporter there using the term spare. Joe Biden is attempting to spare his son. Let's talk about who has not been spared. We're talking about Joe Biden, author of the crime bill Joe. Yes, I still call him that. This is a guy who wrote legislation that put harsher penalties on, in particular, Black men for drugs. Some of you watching may have known people that were affected by Joe Biden's crime bills. We're talking about people getting 20 years in prison for weed. They weren't spared. I don't see Joe Biden trying to pardon any of the men that fell victim to his crime bill. So when we talk about spare, we need to talk about who really should have been spared. All this time that Joe Biden has been in office, has Joe Biden tried to pardon any of those people that were affected by his crime bills? No. Has Joe Biden tried to move the needle in any way, shape, or form for criminal justice reform, especially when it comes to black men? That's who his crime bill primarily targeted. That was taking the black man out of the home. We all know that in the criminal justice system, that a black man who has the same record as a white man is going to face harsher penalties. So when we talk about who should be spared, why did Joe Biden spare any of the black men that fell victim to his crime bill? Now, a lot of people want to bring up Donald Trump, and you can go there. We can do that. Donald Trump, I would say the same thing. Donald Trump is not above the law, should not be above the law, which I've said before on this show. But a number of people would have you believe that I'm okay with Donald Trump being above the law, but not okay with Biden and his son being above the law. That is not the case. The difference here, however, is that Joe Biden wrote legislation that penalized drugs and targeted black men. Donald Trump did not write legislation that did that. And when Biden won presidency, he had an opportunity here to right a wrong, and he chose not to. Instead, he's using his opportunity, he's using his privilege, he's using his position to pardon his son. Oftentimes, people in power look out for themselves, and some would even argue that Donald Trump did pardon people like Angela Stanton, other black prisoners, whereas Joe Biden is not looking in that direction. Now, some of you may not remember, but I do. And so if you don't remember, we're going to go right down that lane, because I just want to remind you what Joe Biden said on the Senate floor when it came to the crime bill. I want to go ahead and bring in this here from Ricky J. Mark. I recall watching old clips of Joe Biden a while back, and while I recognize the impact of speech impediments like stutters and tics, Biden was awfully coherent when pushing the 1994 crime bill. Let's go ahead and get into this. Again, no one is apparently above the law. Here's a reminder.
This bill is not the answer to the crime problem. This is to bring some relief, immediate relief, to people under siege in America. So I want to make it clear to those editorial writers and to those people in my state and other states that Biden isn't more police and more bricks and more mortars and more boot camps and more drug courts and all that. Isn't that just ignoring the problem? The answer is it is dealing with a symptom. An important symptom, and must be dealt with because we must take back our neighborhoods. Somewhere on the order of 70% of one population group in America will have children born out of wedlock. And
let's pause here, because I want to be very clear, and hit that like button if you get a chance to do so. I want to be very clear here. Who is he talking about? Born out of wedlock. He's talking about black people. Again, this is Joe Biden. This isn't Donald Trump speaking. This is Joe Biden. He said we must take back our neighborhoods. Does that include your son? Because listening to this conversation, you would think that the only people that were using drugs or the only people that were selling drugs were black people. Let's continue.
Another population group in America, it's like 40%. And the largest population group in America, racial group in America, something like 25%. The reason why these folks are convicted felons ain't because they have high IQs. They're stupid.
Here's Joe Biden calling black people stupid.
Most of them, they're not only predators, they're stupid. The real
predators and stupid. And this is who black people are clutching their pearls for. This is who black people are out there defending. Not all black people. Most black people don't vote. But this is who some black people were out there clutching their pearls for. Crime Bill Joe. Does this include his son? Is Hunter Biden a predator? Is Hunter Biden stupid? Or does Hunter Biden get a pass not only because he's a white man, but because he's Joe Biden's son?
The smart ones don't get caught. We don't know how to rehabilitate. We have no idea how to rehabilitate. A noble urging, instinct on our part. But the truth is, when a criminal is rehabilitated, we don't know whether it's real or not, or to recognize it. And secondly, if we're convinced it's real, we don't know why he got rehabilitated. He literally, and I'm not being facetious, he may have seen God. He may have come to religion. He may have decided that his son or daughter's future was hanging in the balance. He may, whatever. We didn't know why it happened. It may be because of the program he went through in the prison system. But we had no notion why. And so we used to have indeterminate sentences. We used to say that we would allow a parole board to decide when or when not someone was rehabilitated. So they'd march after a certain period of time before a parole board. Usually the good actors or actresses got parole, and the ones that weren't so good didn't get parole. So the law we wrote says, hey, if you got sentenced and convicted, the federal judge has to give you 11-year sentence.
11-year sentence.
He or she can't say, well, I understand that your background was such that your mother may have not loved you when you were 7 and your father left you when you were 1. And by the way, when you got to school, you sat next to someone who was antisocial and that rubbed off on you. And therefore, we realize you had a tough year. Can't do that.
This is Joe Biden saying that we cannot make excuses for someone's environment. This is Joe Biden saying that, oh, because you grew up in a single family home, we cannot have any type of mercy on you. But his son grew up in a 2-parent household, grew up in a privileged household, grew up in a household that actually had some type of generational wealth or was establishing some type of generational wealth. And his son chose the path to use drugs, to get involved in all different types of crimes, to have a gun possession when he wasn't supposed to. Your son, what's the excuse for Hunter Biden? What is the excuse for your son who grew up in a 2-parent household, who grew up with resources that a lot of Black kids in urban America did not have? What is the excuse for your son? Why doesn't Hunter Biden automatically get 11 years? No one should be applauding the fact that Joe Biden is pardoning his son, especially Black people.
They go to jail for 11 years, flat. He said, what this is going to do, Joe, it's going to fill up more prisons now that judges can't put people on probation. And he was right. So I, along with others, introduced legislation to spend more money to build federal prisons.
So there's Joe Biden advocating for increasing the prison industrial complex. Joe Biden wasn't trying to rehabilitate people. As many times as he were to tell you that his son had a tough time, he goes on to say, and that his son is in recovery. Oh, it's okay for his son to take that path. But during this time, Joe Biden wasn't trying to concern himself with recovery when it came to Black men. He wanted them locked up. And yet people are applauding the fact that Joe Biden is pardoning his son. One of those people is MSNBC's own Simone Sanders. You can see it right here. Good for president and good for Hunter. What did I tell you? All of these people, Simone Sanders says good for the president and good for Hunter. Simone Sanders sold her soul the moment she got on MSNBC News. She had already sold it and gave it away. You were going to be out here being a simp for Joe Biden, and she worked on Joe Biden's campaign. And when this issue of the crime bill was brought to her attention during the campaign, she made excuses for Joe Biden. Simone Sanders has been treating Joe Biden like he's master to her, and she has got to defend him at all costs, because that is the price that she had to pay for selling her soul to MSNBC. Selling her soul to corporations, selling her soul to the business class. Simone Sanders was also one of the many that said that Donald Trump should not be above the law, but now it's okay for Joe Biden and his son to be above the law. Everybody see the problem with the two-party system? You see, when it's your party, it's okay for you to make excuses for what they do. When it's your party, all of a sudden, it's okay for them to be above the law. On the chalkboard behind me, it says hypocrisy, because that's what this is all about. It's very hypocritical. And there are a number of liberals who are applauding this right now on social media. The same ones who told you that Donald Trump should not be above the law are perfectly fine with Joe Biden being above the law, with Joe Biden's son being above the law. Till this day, Tara Reade still has not had the opportunity to testify in front of Congress about what Joe Biden allegedly did to her. So miss me with the whole nobody should be above the law, because many of you pundits sat right back there after Tara Reade had come forward with her story about Joe Biden assaulting her, and you didn't want anything to do with it. You guys wanted nothing to do with Tara Reade. You didn't want to talk to Tara Reade. So all of a sudden it is okay for certain people to be above the law. Sell out Bakari Sellers, also in the same camp. Y'all ran and won on pardoning actual insurrectionists. Chill on a man pardoning his son. You see this? You see how all the black pundits and politicians, you see how they're coming forward to defend Joe Biden? Why doesn't Bakari Sellers get up here and ask Joe Biden, would you pardon those men that were impacted by your crime bill? Why doesn't Bakari Sellers do that? Men whose records have been, destroyed, their lives have been destroyed because of Joe Biden's crime bills. Why aren't you tweeting about that? These people are all bought and paid for, and anybody else who tells you anything different is lying to you, and they're a part of the same game. My response to Bakari Sellers: just admit you're a hypocrite and keep it moving. You guys are full of shit. You spent months saying no one is above the law, and yet you're applauding it for Biden. Man, get the fuck out of here. It's all hypocrisy. They're all hypocrites. So what you need to understand is that, once again, you are seeing how partisan politics affects decisions and so-called opinions. You are seeing that people really don't, for the most part, stand on any type of principle, especially when it impacts their party. So it was never really about anyone being above the law. It was about someone who was from the opposition party being above the law. Because when it happens in the Democratic Party, they're totally fine with it. I heavily disagree with Joe Biden pardoning Hunter Biden. I think if anyone should be pardoned, it should be those that were victims of Joe Biden's crime bills. All of these people are corrupt. Corruption runs deep in DC. And if you have the time, I highly recommend that you watch a show called The Madness. I just finished it last night, because this is what they focus on. They focus on how the billionaire class, the wealthy, the powerful, the politicians, the well-connected, how they are able to get away with literally murder because they are in powerful positions, because they have aligned themselves with the billionaire class, because they are accepted by Wall Street. These people are very much protected. It also discusses how, for the most part, even when it comes to the FBI, they don't go after the head of the snake. They never try to take the head down. They take down the bottom of the snake. They allow the corruption to continue, and they protect those that are in those positions. There's a lot of hypocrisy here, folks, and you got to call it out. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.